Okay, so we've cleaned up this place. We just need to clean this place and we're done. We can plug in the solar array. So again, we're gonna put that there. So I'm gonna run it like this, just for safety's sake. I know that I sound like a boomer because I'm talking about things that younger people will never have an idea what it is like, but that's one of the reasons why I want to play not drastically older games, but older games. So I'm not gonna be playing Commodore games. For a very good reason. It's not the graphics. There are some games today that are very good and they're intentionally doing the retro graphics of the 1980s and 90s. It's also not the sound. Also, the sound in the early games was horrifyingly bad, even back then. But that was the limitations. For some games, the internal speaker of the... And why are you doing it this way? What? No, 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 no. Why are you doing it this way? For some games, internal speaker on the PC was the only source, the sound source that was available. So yeah, it made sense back then. It doesn't make sense now, and fortunately, PCs no longer have an internal speaker. If they did, that would be horrendous. So it's not the sound, it's not the graphics, it's not even the gameplay for the most part, because some of the old games were real. The first MechWarrior was was a very old game, and it was actually quite good. But those kinds of games no longer work. It is it is heartbreaking to say this, but it takes so much effort to get any of those games running. Fortunately, developers have realized that there are a lot of people like me who are interested in old games and they want to see old games brought back, which is a blessing because here is a good example. StarCraft 1 was made in 1998. It is one of my favorite ever strategy games. It is the one I'm making a walkthrough for on my YouTube channel right now. I'm taking my time with it because I'm doing streaming as well, and I just didn't get around to. I do have the time for it. I just didn't get around to finishing it. It is one of my favorite ever strategy games. I still have the original disc that I bought in 1998 of StarCraft 1 and Brood War expansion. That game originally released I had on 3 discs. One for the Brood War expansion and one for the campaign, and there was one for multiplayer. Although I'm not sure if the one for multiplayer was actually necessary. I think that might be something just because I was in Croatia and that's... I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is, I still have that. I can't install it. Doesn't matter what kind of patch or community patch or mod I put on it. StarCraft 1 that was released in 1998 in its original format on a CD no longer works. It doesn't. You can make it work. You can use DOSBox. You can use uh, some mods to make your computer seem like it was it is in 1998, but it doesn't really work. If you try to run it through DOSBox, you can, but it'll run 15 times too fast. And I'm probably saying 15, and it's probably more than that. Why did you stop? The pipe's blocked. What's in this pipe that you can't handle? Oh, this is broken. because I made it out of iron. So it overheated. That's okay. We have iron. So I was ecstatic when Activision announced that they were going to remaster the the StarCraft game because my copy just doesn't work anymore. It is crappy on Activision that they charging for the remaster, but that's Activision. However, I will say one good thing about the StarCraft remastered Activision put out, and that is that I think if you have StarCraft 2, any of them, you get StarCraft Remastered with base textures for free, or you just get the whole game for free, whatever the reason. So I didn't have to pay for my remaster of. I do have to pay if I want to get the HD textures, but I don't. And that's why I'm not. I mean, I got HD textures in the meantime, but if anybody actually watched my. So I'll deconstruct this, make it out of steel. If anybody actually is watching uh, my walkthrough of StarCraft, you will notice that I'm using the original textures. That's not accidental. That's how the game looked. That's how the game originally was, and that's what I'm doing it with it right now. I will likely return when do it with HD remastered textures the future sometime, but for the because I'm doing a franchise run, which means that I'm going to actually move this thing now. Since I'm doing a franchise run, so I will be playing all of the StarCrafts in a single channel playthrough. I wanted for the first game to look like how it actually looked when it was made, when it was the new thing. And you might you might call me pedantic because of it, but no, that's what it was. For example, one of the games that I want to run a franchise run for is System Shock, or the Shock games, uh, the Shock series, which started with System Shock and went all of the way today to BioShock, which is a spiritual successor. And there is also System Shock Remaster and all of that, but that's later on. The point is, when I do the System Shock uh, walkthrough, or if I stream it, we're gonna be playing it as it originally looked like. Fortunately, hey Galaxy Squad, not much, just talking about old games and my plans for the channel, and about how times changed between how games were and how games are. Also, I'm trying to finish this without killing anybody because things are falling from the sky. Yeah, so originally I'm just gonna give you, since you've asked, I'm gonna give you a short breakdown of what I was talking about. So, I originally thought that I'm gonna be doing Oni, Oxygen Not Included every Sunday, and then another different game on Wednesdays, and that's gonna be it. Well, all type of old games. While I'm doing mostly strategy games and uh, survival games and those management type of games, when it comes to old games, the spectrum is going to be a lot wider. For example, one of the games that I'm thinking of playing on stream is a really old PlayStation 1 game that's actually kind of obscure. That's called Wild 9. It's a very unique arcade game that was made in the golden age of arcade games on. Yeah, from 19 actually yes, 1990, maybe even some of them before then, but 1990 to 2000 and let's say 5, although it might be I'm gonna be doing franchise runs essentially, wherever possible. But I wanna play older games, so I'm gonna be running old PlayStation 1 games on an emulator, of course, because that's the only way I can do it. I'm gonna be. I just mentioned that I'm gonna be at some point. I'm gonna be having the franchise right of the System Shock games. I'm also be gonna do Command and Conquer. I'm actually doing walkthrough of StarCraft 1 and Brood War on my YouTube channel as we speak, but I'm probably gonna play that again on stream at a later date with HD textures on. Uh, and a lot of others. Just I want the channel to be more flexible. So the in short decision is I'm not gonna be focusing on just Oxygen Not Included and whatever I feel like for Wednesdays. I'm actually gonna be a variety streamer, and I'm going to bring variety to my channel. So there'll be a lot of games, uh, old games, new games, whatever I feel like it. So I haven't decided what's going to be the next game I'm going to be streaming after I'm done with Oni, but it is in the cards. It's what I want to do. It's how I want to run my channel. My reasoning behind it is there are better Oni streamers than I out there, and I'm fairly new, so I shouldn't limit myself to a single concept or a single media, a single game type or whatever. So I've actually been talking a lot, but considering that we have been doing this for the entire stream, I think it's not a bad thing. Right now, I'm trying to get this thing cleaned up so that we can actually start getting this thing to work. It's That's the only thing that actually is left for this Oni colony, to get into space and to stop being scolded. Where are you being scolded anyway? Can't see. If I can't see, it doesn't matter. Oh, Twitch died on you. I would say press F, but if you press F, you might actually do something on Twitch. Uh, Twitch is being a bit of an unstable biatch, it has to be said. But it has been behaving quite well for me, at least tonight. Last stream on Wednesday, Twitch was actually being kind of very unstable. So I was just saying that where I'm not sure where you where you dropped out, but I was just saying in short that the plan is to expand my channel to do old games as well as new, and that's pretty much it. Uh, I'm gonna be doing all kinds of things. I'm probably going to be doing. I'm thinking that what kind of type of games I want to start with, and I think that I'm just going to, because I grew up with, well, sort of grew up with PlayStation 1. I might actually do PlayStation 1 games, because a lot of them were very original, they were very cool, but they were very obscure. Uh, Games like Wild 9, Unholy War, uh, then there was the War Games, then there was, I can't even remember that strategy name, then there was the Crush, Kill, and Destroy. Most of these games were very, very, very good, and they were on PlayStation 1. But people generally don't get to experience them anymore because they didn't sell so well and they didn't spawn a franchise. So nobody knows about them. So the reason why I want to go with Wild 9 is because it is an arcade game, so it's easy to follow. It has a very simple premise, but it has a very unique gameplay mechanic, one that has not been done since. In Wild 9, you kill your enemies by torturing them, and you pass obstacles by torturing your enemies. essentially in the very first level, there is an obstacle which is a grinder. So it's essentially two rollers filled with spikes, and you can't get past it. You can't jump over it. Yeah, it's everybody's thing, but nobody wants to admit that. Uh, so you can't jump over the spikes. You can't go through them. You can't break them with missiles or bombs. So you go to a nearby enemy spawner, and your only tool or weapon is kind of a manipulation beam. So you use that beam to grab an opponent, and then he starts squirming and screaming, asking to be released and like let me go and so on. And you throw them into the grinder. You throw them into the grinder twice, and the roller starts squeaking and sparking, and you throw them into three times, and it pretty much clogs up the grinder and it breaks, and then you can pass. I actually was considering that after Oni I would play Space Haven on stream as my next game because I will always have at least one game which is a strategy or management game because I that's pretty much my favorite thing to do. And I do play Space Haven. I like Space Haven, but Space Haven is very, 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 very early access, and it just doesn't have the content to. It doesn't have enough to keep you going. I mean, after you leave the second solar system, you pretty much did everything you could do in that game. I stopped playing after my very first playthrough. I stopped playing because there was after half the way through the solar, there was nothing else to do. If you equip your ship with two shield arrays and four energy turrets, you pretty much don't have anything else to worry about. And you can't make big ships. And you don't really have an incentive to do so in Space Haven. Because uh, the lifeblood in Space Haven is, if you play it, you know, the energy rod. You need those blue crystals for it. If you play on a medium difficulty, that thing isn't that easy to find. And you need that both for the ammo and for the shield and for energy. You can make solar panels, but it's not enough, and you get to the point where you can't make more ships because you're just shooting yourself in the foot. You don't really need to make more ships, and that's where it ends. RimWorld. RimWorld would be a very good game to play on stream, and that's one of the ones I'm actually considering right now because RimWorld is magnificent and is next to only one of my favorite one of my favorite colony management games. It's I was listing games that before that were as complex as Oni yet as easy to play, and RimWorld is up there. But I would argue that RimWorld isn't as easy to learn to play as Oni because some of the concepts in RimWorld are more unforgiving. Uh, Specifically, some of the behaviors of the colonists themselves, as well as the environment, the raids. Uh, I guess because of combat and because of the wider array of what can happen to you in RimWorld, it is more difficult to learn. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, but it's one of the reasons why I exactly, it's a bit hard, but when you start off, but it gets easier the more you play it, which is fine. That's how a game should be in essence. And uh, right now, RimWorld is in a place where it isn't that difficult to learn because right now you have enough tutorial messages and tutorials to get you through. When I started playing RimWorld, it was very, very early access, and learning into playing it was a challenge. But yeah, RimWorld is one of the games I'm considering to play on stream next because it is like Oni, and it is very flexible like Oni. You can approach many things in different ways. There is a limiting factor in RimWorld that after a certain point, like in Oni, you reach the point where you can't do much. I would argue that if you play on Randy Random, you don't need that many mods to make the game more difficult. If you are on the level now where even with Randy Random, in scaling events, it's still too easy for you, then kudos to you. You're a much better player than I am. Uh, but Randy Random itself and escalating events is enough to give me a challenge. The more items is uh, RimWorld is one of the very few games I would and sometimes do play with mods. I prefer vanilla. I play only vanilla. I don't put any mods on vanilla just because the experience with mods of Oni is too far apart from how I perceive the game that needs to be should be played, but it which is a completely personal thing. RimWorld, on the other hand, it might be due to the way it's built. I don't mind playing it with mods. In fact, I do and I would uh, play it with mods. Uh, where the I where you put the I in the, you've spelled it vanilla. It's vanilla, so the first I should be an A and the first A should be an I. Other than that, all good. Okay. But yeah, we are reaching the point where I will have to pick a second game. Now, I do want to keep the strategy. No problem. I want to keep the strategy games on Sundays. So if RimWorld is the next game that I'll be playing on Sundays, it'll be the next strategy game. It will be played on Sundays. Uh, Again, and Wednesdays will be something different. I do want to make concepts different. Eventually, I'll increase the number of my streaming days, and that'll make everything go faster. But for the time being, it's 2 days. There is a reason why I'm doing it 2 days. Is I have a day job, and I'm also putting all of the streams on YouTube. Every single stream is 3 videos that I have to edit, render, complete, and upload. So I don't have enough time to do more streaming than that. Eventually, I'll get past that hurdle, and then I will put in more stream. Either I'll hire somebody or I'll just take a few days in a week to do those particular tasks. Yeah, I do have a YouTube. The YouTube is channel is Angel Shade, and every stream gets uploaded to YouTube, both for content and for archive of the content. Because while Twitch does have the possibility and capability to save your clips, it's not permanent, and from what I've heard, it's not completely reliable. So I would rather not risk it because I don't want to lose any of these things. Now, I've mentioned this before you joined us today. Is I stream for my own amusement. Well, it is. My Twitch is True Angel Shade, and my YouTube is just Angel Shade. So I should probably put that into my channel description at some point. That's another thing I was discussing earlier is that there's a couple of things that I need to do with my channel, like make the load screens and standby screens and so on and so forth. Among other things, I do need to put in my. I will also need to, although I don't want to, will have to host a Twitter account because that's where all of the notifications will have to be, and I don't want to. I don't like Twitter at all. But when if you want to do something quasi professionally or at least seriously, you have to do it like that. Yeah, I can use Streamlabs as well. That's like I said, I am considering uh, moving to all of those things, expanding. I'm learning. I'm still learning all of these things. I am very new, and we have cleared the mountain of crap that was above us, which means we can finally clear all of this, and I'm actually not gonna bother making this again. I'm just gonna tell them to move all of it by hand. Uh, we can now start working on the detector, which I'm going to place immediately. Yes, you can do the themes for live, standby, etc. on Streamlabs, but you can also do it on Twitch itself. You just, well, I'm using OBS, and OBS has those functions just like Streamlabs does. Oh, you are getting some drop frames. Oh, I see. From just when you are streaming. So you're referring to when you stream, you have some drop frames when you're using. So, are there any drop frames in my stream right now? Except for the lag, which which happens every single time a new cycle starts up. Yeah, OBS. I wanted to use OBS before, like years back, but for recording purposes. But I couldn't get the quality of the video up, even though I had the requirements. Thanks. So no drop frames on my stream. Perfect. Thanks. So I wanted to use OBS before, but I couldn't get the quality up for some reason. I don't know why. I already had a decent PC back then, but now it works fine and it's very flexible. It's very useful. I like it. I like it. Thanks, Galaxy. Good to know. Uh, so I run out of storage space. Expanding storage. Well, I'm gonna be telling them to dig by hand anyway, so this is outer space. No germs can survive in outer space, so just dig this out. Oh. Honestly, my graphics card right now isn't that brilliant, but it's more than enough for streaming. It's more than enough for streaming. Uh, for streaming full stop. I'm not sure what I was trying to say. It's more than enough for streaming. But eventually, well, probably later this year, around Christmas, I'm gonna be getting a new graphics card to max out what I can get out quality-wise out of my streams. Right now, it's a balance between quality and bitrate, so I don't lose, or at least attempt not to lose any frames, while at the same time not sacrificing any quality needlessly. Okay, we're gonna deconstruct all of this because there's no point in keeping any of this anymore. Let's check what the situation is. Oh, we are dropping on the food, so we do need to get the food situation under control. And since all of this is not working, we will be dismantling this whole thing. Yeah, the whole thing with those with the new RTX is kind of a very peculiar timing for me personally. Uh, because a couple of weeks back, as I was talking to the missus about, oh, this is full of polluted oxygen. I have a deodorizer here, so it's fine, and there is more here. That's fine. So I was talking to the missus about getting a new graphics card, which she was, of course, delighted by. She loves nothing more than when I spend money on more computer stuff. That's, of course, irony. Uh, I was talking about which graphics card I would buy, and this was before the new RTX came out, and I was looking at the prices, and I was like, oh, well, the 2080 Ti looks like a good buy. I might get that. Now I'm happy we didn't. So consider the prices. I'll probably just scrounge up. I do believe I do know what the graphics card you're talking about. It is It is a subject of many memes today. Uh, I have brand new everything except for the graphics card. I still have a GTX 720 in my PC, which is weak comparatively. But it is a point that I've made before to some of my friends. Uh, Graphics cards are not the be all and end all. You don't always have to have a newest one. Even with my setup current that I currently have, I can run Doom Eternal on ultra specs and 100 frames per second easy. So there is and I can stream with the reason with decent quality and decent sound and no problems whatsoever. So obviously it is not a pressing need for me to buy a new graphics card right now and right here and now. But it is that kind of opinion which is dominating, let's say, the market today. That you always have to have the newest one, the strongest one, the best one. You don't. I had every single graphics card I ever bought in my entire life. When I bought the next one, like three generations went between them. I never needed to always have the strongest one to run the newest games decently. My previous graphics card that I had before this one, uh, I only replaced 4 years ago, and it was running for 6 or 7 years before then. It's a marketing illusion. Yeah, so what happens there is you described it when your PC just dies. So i- if you try to run a game which is too demanding of your system than what you have for, it won't work and it will crash. Your PC will simply turn itself off. So that's what you have. So in your case, the graphics card that you need to replace to a new one. But in my example, I didn't, because the difference between what I had, which was 4 years old, and what's out today isn't drastic enough to warrant it. So it is something that I'm going to do simply because I'm in a capability to do so, but I don't have a pressing need for it. I have another oxyfern that I haven't planted. Why do I have an oxyfern that I haven't planted? I forgot about an oxyfern. I'm going to plant it here. Oh, no, 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 no. That needs to be hydroponics. Yeah, if I was talking just before you came in, I was talking about. Oh, I did make a planter. I just didn't plant it. So just before, shortly before you came to the stream today, I talked about how games used to be, and when the games, I don't know what I'm doing now. So, or before, back in the 90s, you didn't need the graphics card didn't exist because there was no 3D graphics, and even well, there was, it just wasn't 3D accelerated. It was very, very basic. Well, yeah, as you say, it is one of the ways that you can test the strength of your PC by trying to run something that's not necessarily something that your PC can handle and see what it does. Definitely, I did that myself. When the original Bioshock came out, my graphics card back then couldn't handle it, and when I installed it, and the very first scene, it did go through the opening cinematic, but when the game started, the level didn't load. So it was only rendering the flames and the lighthouse, but not the rest of the level. So yeah, I did the same thing when I was having a lower spec PC. My point is though that you don't necessarily always need to have the latest. As long as it can take it, you don't need a new one. Once you reach the point where you do need a new one, your PC will let you know. It will start lagging, you will have to put everything on a lower resolution and so on and so forth. As long as you don't have to do that, or as long as you can get by on let's say 90 frames and medium quality, you really don't need a new graphics card. And that's what I was talking about before. Before you didn't, as 3D graphics were very limited, you didn't really need. My first graphics card was called the Voodoo 2, and I needed it because I wanted to play Quake 2. Yeah, that's another thing that I was talking about. When I started gaming back in the 80s, pixels were the size of your hand. I don't care about graphics. For me, gameplay and overall quality of the game made are what sells the game. As long as the game is well made, as in made with a certain standard of quality, and it is actually not. Don't do not dig this out yet. As long as it meets a certain standard of quality, and as long as it has a good concept or a good gameplay, graphics are relevant, completely relevant. I don't mean that literally. When I said that the pixels were the size of your hand, they were quite large. So back in the 1980s, uh, back in the 1980s, when the gaming was still in its beginnings, uh, you couldn't get that many pixels out because the screens couldn't handle them, first of all, and the graphics couldn't handle them. So you had very large pixels on the screen because the resolutions were very small. The resolutions that I originally played on were 120. I Hold on, I'm gonna tell you what the resolution was for the Commodore 64 because I don't remember. 320 by 200. So you could only fit 320 by 200 pixels on a screen. That was it. For comparison, today is 4K. So keep that in mind. On a screen that you're looking at right now, that one has, if you have a standard resolution, that's 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Now, on a Commodore, where I started playing games, it was 320 pixels by 200 pixels. That's it. That's all that could be put on the screen. So if you divide the screen size, just Google uh, any Commodore 64 or a Spectrum game, and you're gonna see how pixels look like, how the pictures look like better. Not the size of the pixels themselves, but how the picture looked like. It was very low detail, very low spec. And believe it or not, even then, 3D games existed. There is a game called The first Mech Warrior was a 3D game. It was very basic. It was very framework, but it was 3D and it worked. And it was enough for us back then. So graphics don't really mean anything to me. Nice graphics are always a bonus, but for me, you won't sell me a game if it just looks pretty. If that was the case, I would never play Oni. Although, let's be fair, Oni looks beautiful. This art style is absolutely gorgeous. But you will never get me to buy a game because it looks pretty. Looks can be a bonus. They cannot be the basis of a game. Game can be pretty. It can be Games can be very atmospheric even with low res graphics. There are several games on the market today that use very rudimentary graphics and are very atmospheric. One of the best known, for a good reason, is Undertale. Undertale has very, very retro graphics. It has very, very limited uh, uh, graphical, let's say, performance, but it is one of the best storytelling games, best the games of the best atmosphere that have been made in recent years. And it doesn't have fancy. Graphic is a gimmick. If you don't have a solid foundation of gameplay behind that gimmick, you have nothing. Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, development of PC technology today has reached let's say, a stable uh, pace where you can keep up with it, so to speak. Because if you buy a brand new computer today, it will last you for quite a number of years, quite solidly, and then you can get by reducing the quality of the graphics and whatever else to keep going and keep playing. Even the new games that are made after your machine was done. But I was doing the same thing. I was doing the same thing, and for example, my very first, let's say, modern PC was a Pentium 3, which had 733 megahertz, not gigahertz, megahertz. And that machine, back in 1999, that machine had problems with performance issues with the game called Unreal Tournament. That was a brand new game back then, and my PC couldn't handle it. It could handle it on low graphics, couldn't handle it on high, and back then the resolutions were 800 by 600. Uh, my PC with 722 megahertz and a Peasly Weasley Voodoo 2 graphics card couldn't do it. It couldn't handle it. It didn't have enough RAM, it didn't have enough anything to keep the game going. So I would reduce the graphics to nothing and play it like that. Didn't matter. The gameplay was still fun. It didn't matter that the textures all looked like they were blurred out. It didn't matter that half of the effects weren't rendering. It didn't matter that all of the rocket explosions only had sounds and no actual animations. Didn't care. The game was fun. Kept playing it. A year later, we got a new PC, uh, which then could handle it at its best. Got enjoyed that and kept that had that PC until 2003 or 4 when that yeah, 2004, because then Call of Duty came out. And my PC, which at that point had a single gigahertz, couldn't handle Call of Duty 1. So again, I would decrease the quality, I would decrease everything, and I would play the game, and it would look great. Then Call of Duty 2 came out, and then Call of Duty 4 on PC came out. And by the time Call of Duty 4 came out, my PC was severely underperformant to do. However, on Call of Duty 4, what you could do is, in multiplayer at least, you could turn a bunch of crap off. So I was still able to play my Call of Duty 4 even on an old PC. And then I got a new PC. Yes? What was in your recommend? So while we were talking, we managed to clean this up. For the most part, I lined up this cleanup job. Hopefully they finish it soon. Need to also clear this up. I need to set up the place for the scanner. Where is the scanner? Can't remember. It's automation? I think it's automation. It is automation. Steel. Oh, you mean the what would happen to the graphics card or the item hardware, but that wouldn't work. So that was in your recommend. That was in your recommend. Yeah, there are uh, there are plenty of ways described on YouTube. If you have, oh, this actually is a bad idea. What would happen? What to do if you have a weaker spec PC? What to do to get the most out of it anyway? There are quite a number of solutions for that kind of a scenario, but ultimately it always boils down to reducing the requirements or specs of what you're playing until you can run it. That's the basic idea, and that idea was from the beginning of gaming. Uh, it is a weird thing to tell to people today because when you say multiplayer, you think of hundreds of people playing a game online, or at least dozens of people playing the game online. But when original Doom came out, its multiplayer was for 3 people and later 4. So your multiplayer was over a modem and it was for 4 people max. Uh, and there was a way of using the multiplayer mode as a way to increase the performance of your then PC. Yeah, Doom is amazing. It's one of that's why it still keeps up, and Doom is one of the games I'm probably going to be playing a walkthrough through on my channel on YouTube, but not sure. I'm not going to be playing any of the. I might be playing some shooter games on the channel as well on the stream, but not really decided yet on that. Shooter games are they're overdone, so to speak. But the way that you would increase the performance of an old computer that was running a Doom game was to load the campaign mission through the multiplayer because for some reason the multiplayer required less assets. It would cause some of the parts of the game to glitch out, but if your game was misbehaving because your computer was too weak, which was not very common back then, even your most basic PCs could run Doom without any problems. But if you were one of the unhappy few who were having problems with your Doom, you could run it through multiplayer to get it to work properly. Well, Tearing of the Demons, that's a new concept that was made for the Doom Eternal and the Doom 2016. Originally, Doom was just about shooting the demons because the basic games couldn't even picture something like that happening. The original Doom still holds up for what it's worth, but it's a much simpler game. And of course, these days, if you want to play the original Doom, you have to buy a remaster version or one of the conversions because the original Doom, if you want to run the original Doom, you'll have to do it through either through DOSBox or through different type of emulator, and that's a pain in the butt because it causes glitches. And that brings us back to the limitations of old games on new PCs. If you try to run some very old games from the 90s on a new PC and you don't set up your emulator properly or you don't set up DOSBox properly, the game will run 300 times too fast. That's why I talked about this earlier in the stream is that I can't. I still have the original disc for StarCraft 1, the game I'm uh, recording a walkthrough for right now on the channel, and I can't install it anymore because even if I do manage to install it, it runs 300 times too fast and I can't slow it down. So yeah. And somebody told me that you can adjust it with the cycle rate on DOSBox, but it's too much of a faff. And I have StarCraft remastered now, so which I can play in original graphics. So, yay! And I didn't have to pay for it. I'm thinking I don't really don't know because obviously I own the game, so I don't know what was the Activision's business model for the StarCraft remastered. Is it everybody who owns StarCraft 2 gets StarCraft Remastered, or everybody gets it if they have Battle.net accounts, or if you own the original game? I don't know. A virtual machine can only run the games for the system it was designed for. You use a virtual machine for games that run on operating systems that you don't have. For example, you use a virtual machine. Hold on, what? No automation. Wire scan quality 25%. Ooh. Okay, so I do need to add more of them. Uh, so for example, if you had a game for from 1995, 1998 or 1995, you would have to run it on the operating system which was available at that time. That was Windows 95 back then. If you don't have Windows 95, then you can't run the game. So what game are you trying to boot up? Galaxy, what game are you trying to boot up? Yeah, if you're getting an error in your BIOS, it's either that your machine can't run it at all, or there is a different kind of a problem there. What games are you trying to set up, and for what operating system? How old is the game? Which games are you trying to load up through a virtual machine? Because a virtual machine will not circumvent the requirements of the game you're trying to load. It will simply adjust your machine to work with the system that the game was designed for. So, for example, if you want to play a game from 1998, there is no remaster for that game. The only way you can run that game would be through DOSBox or a similar emulator because those games require DOS to work. So you use DOSBox to run the game. This, however, will not circumvent the requirements the game has. So if it needs a certain amount of RAM or a certain amount of processing power, it still needs that. So you can't circumvent the base requirements of the game. You just get the game running through a virtual machine because you're missing the operating system. The most common things that will happen on virtual machines and on emulators is the game will not work unless you set up some things properly depending on the emulator. For example, if you are emulating a PlayStation game, on the emulator you hold on, why are you okay, Abe, it's time for you to go and heal up or you're gonna die on me here. So for example, if you're running a game that's designed for PlayStation, you have to adjust your emulator to make your PC work like a PlayStation. So that it displays in correct resolution, that it displays a correct input for your controllers, for your saving, and so on. It will still require you to actually have the game, and it will still require you to have the platform for it. It's just that you can emulate it, so even if you don't have the operating system or the platform, you can still play it. Virtual machines do that. They allow you to circumvent a certain limitation placed upon it, not necessarily by the manufacturer, but mostly because of the time. Most games that you purchased two, 2 to 20 years ago, you still should be able to play. For example, when I bought the original Dungeon Keeper in 1997, 6, can't remember which year it was. When I bought the original Dungeon Keeper, I did not have a plan that I will have to buy a new Dungeon Keeper remastered 20 years down the line. Since I still own the copy, I should still be able to play that copy. But because the operating system has changed, if I want to play my copy of Dungeon Keeper 1 and not buy a new remastered version from GOG, I have to run it through DOSBox. Yeah, you can't use the emulator or DOSBox to see uh, how the old versions looked like. If you want to see how old Windows 95 actually looked like, well, you can download a theme for Windows 10 that looks like Windows 95, uh, but you would actually need a copy of Windows 95 installed to see how it actually looks like and behaves like, which is something that nobody should do ever again in in the following history, because Windows 95 was awful. No, no, it's not an oof. Old Windows were awful. People don't understand that. They have this new fancy gancy Windows 10 that's like, oh, this is brilliant. Of all the Windows that were made, Windows 98 was good, Windows XP was good, and I think that's it. Windows 95 was unstable as hell. Blue screen of death, as if you don't know what it is, when you I get all worked up about it. When your computer decided to crash for any reason, you would get blue screen of death, and that was incredibly common on 95, especially if you wanted to run games on it. It would crash like hell all the freaking time. It would happen regularly. Windows 95 was awful. It was simply, people don't understand. They think that Windows was always good. It wasn't. It's just it we if you wanted to run anything, you needed to have Windows because they had a monopoly on operating system, and it's still the case today. Windows 10 has so many things that are still irking me to this day that Microsoft has never fixed. So many inherent instabilities. Do you know why people use Linux or Linux or however you want to call it, and are hoping that there will be more operating systems made in the future? It's because of what Windows drives us bonkers. It is unstable. Oopsie daisy. That looked like it was painful. Uh, ooh, ooh. Okay, nobody died. Excellent. Moving on. So, uh, old Windows were. So you had a blue screen of death even on your new PC. Well, then you know what I'm talking about. Now imagine if that happened every 2 hours. Imagine if your computer was doing the blue screen of death every couple of hours. For reasons unknown to you. And today on Windows 10, thankfully you can actually today you can actually have a task manager open even if your computer freezes. You couldn't back then. It was enough to drive a person crazy. Yeah, overworking of the CPU. That is one of the most common things why you get the blue screen of death. It essentially your PC overworks itself and dies, and we know why it is today. And back then there was back in the 90s, you only had the internet was only beginning. There was no Google yet.